Greetings, listeners. This is Jennifer. I voice Harper for the Zombie Apocalypse Survivor Radio. And I want to thank you personally for listening. And I want to tell you about my new Substack, which I'm hoping you will consider subscribing to. I pretty much do this podcast single-handedly in my spare time. And anything that you could do to help me out, I would greatly appreciate. The podcast will always be free. I am very committed to that. So if you are enjoying this and cannot afford to do more than listen, thank you for listening, and I hope you recommend me to your friends. But if you can afford a little more and want to get the podcast episodes early, want to get some additional writings set in the kingdom of the undead, I would love it if you would subscribe to my Substack. I appreciate you listening, and I thank you so much for being here. As always, feel free to reach out at zasurvivorradio@gmail.com, or if you go to the Substack, which is the Zompocalypse Survivor Radio Substack, also Za Survivor Radio, reach out to me there. I would love to hear from you and connect with you. And if you have any stories in this setting you'd like to tell, send them in and I will read them aloud. I appreciate all of you, and I will let you get back to the podcast. Welcome to the end of the world, survivors. You are tuned into this station, one of the last voices on the airwaves. I'm Harper, broadcasting from a radio station that somehow still hums with life. I am no longer alone, and my friends and I are looking for the author of Robert's Rules of Chaos while we rebuild and forge new alliances. This is where we build our society. There is no going back. But as we forge forward, creating a new world order, I'll share stories of your fellow survivors and how the Robert's Rules of Chaos have helped them survive, or at least given them some goalposts to focus on. I'll be your guide through the madness, sharing the locations of safe havens, theories, and information about our new world, and the occasional existential crisis that comes with a zompocalypse. The world's gone dark, the dead outnumber the living, but we are surviving and rebuilding. The old world is gone, but we are adapting to surviving in this new world and the new rules that come with surviving the zombie menace. Stick around if you're still alive. Welcome to the Zombie Apocalypse Survivor Radio Show. This is DJ Harper coming at you with Robert's Rules of Chaos, rule number 4. And this is a pretty long one, lots of details. Everybody rests in peace. Every human life is sacred, every human life is an ally, and every human deserves to find peace at the end of their life's journey. No matter what you think of a person when they were alive, once they are dead, they should receive the same respect you would want for yourself when your time comes. If somebody is dying and there is no chance to save them, or simply upon sober and urgent request, each human is entitled to have their life ended in a way which prevents them from turning. The loss of an ally is only made worse by the simultaneous creation of a new soldier in the enemy army. When possible, bury those who rest, or otherwise respect their funerary wishes. If there is not time, try to come back to take care of them later when there is time. Do not bury the dead with needed supplies. Not only do the living need those more, but also we need to establish the standard that graves are never worth robbing. If a person's funerary wishes or expediency requires burning or cremation of the remains, make sure this is done in a way which does not attract the unresting dead. Or, if done as a lure or distraction for the dead, make sure that the remains are not imperiled by them, unless it is within the wishes of the deceased. Even those dead who have turned against us, who try to kill us, deserve to rest in peace. Each walking corpse is an abomination, a cruel mockery of the person the body used to belong to. We should take every reasonable chance that we can to deprive the enemy of one of their own and put one of our own at peace. Kill the walkers anytime you can do so with impunity. Then take the time, when possible, to respectfully tend to their remains. Don't attract too much dark attention from the enemy, but when you can act against them, do so. With any base, camp, shelter, or compound, keep the perimeter clear whenever possible. Anytime there are 5 zombies or more pushing your outer fences or walls, call their numbers as best you can when you can, so you don't end up under siege. Anybody who does not have the stomach to directly put zombies to rest needs to do so indirectly. We all fight as we can, when we can, or we all shall die. If you do not have it in yourself to put an enemy to rest, assist whoever else is able to do the job as best you can. Distract the enemy, pass the ammo, and otherwise assist those on the front line of this war whenever possible, as best as possible. When putting the enemy to rest, distance kills are the best. The closer you are to the enemy, the greater the risk of death, injury, or infection. Firearms attract attention, so use them sparingly. Bows and crossbows are more subtle, but have issues with range. If you have to engage in melee with the enemy, use pitchforks and pikes to keep them pinned and/or out of arm's reach until an ally can dispatch them. At even closer range, machetes and swords are often better than knives. The more reach, the better, as long as the enemy doesn't get past that reach, where you are vulnerable. Everybody needs to train in methods of putting the dead to rest. They need to learn to defend themselves from attack. They need to learn to shoot, skewer, or crush skulls and brains. They need to learn to decapitate and delimb when necessary. Inability and unwillingness to fight can be tolerated to a degree, but unwillingness to learn to fight only adds to everybody's risk. We each must strive to do things we think we cannot do, and even some things we think we should not do. Survival comes before comfort or qualms, and we can all rest when we're dead. Our boy Robert isn't mincing any words with this one, is he, folks? No. I very much enjoy the Robert's Rules of Chaos looking at this as a war, because it is. I very much like how focused it is on human survival and zombie demise. And I feel like number 4, Everybody Rests in Peace, is very, very good at focusing almost exclusively on human survival. And this rule really, really brings home that this is a fight for our lives. And it's a fight the majority of humans have already lost. And through no fault of their own. The zombies have such an advantage over us. And, Robert saying if there's more than 5 zombies outside your perimeter, it's time to call them. Well, once we have 5 zombies, that's when the Z fear kicks in. And the Z fear really, really messes people up. I mean, having experienced it myself, as I'm sure you have, I think we've lost quite a few people to the Z fear, especially in the early days when we didn't know what was going on, when we were frozen and had no idea why, So this rule has so many facets to it, but I want to focus a little bit on putting the dead to rest. We do not here at the station do burial or cremation for the zombies that we eliminate. What we do is often referred to as sky burial, where you put the body someplace high up and allow carrion eaters, specifically vultures and other carrion eaters, to come and take care of it. And as I have said before, we very much enjoy feeding our vultures here. And we do this with respect to the bodies. We do this with respect to the people that they used to be. We now have a few people of faith who like to say a few words over the bodies and do a funeral of sorts for the unknown dead, because at this point, a lot of the zombies, we don't know who they are. We don't recognize them. There's too many. We have a designated area where we take the bodies of these zombies that we eliminate, and we leave them for the vultures. And one of the things that this does for us is it also lets us know where the zombies are, because the vultures will attack living zombies as food. And so a lot of times, if we see in the air a large wake of vultures circling something, back in the day of the world, we would believe, oh, they're circling a deer. They're circling, probably something that was hit by a car. But now they're circling zombies, and we know it. And sometimes it gives us a decent head start that zombies are on the way, and sometimes we only get 5 minutes. But 5 minutes really can be the difference between life and death. If you know that there is a large group of zombies coming and you have 5 minutes to get inside and to prepare yourself for the Z fear and to get your defenses up, it makes all the difference in the world. It really, really does. And the vultures have saved our group numerous times, both at home and when we've been traveling. There are a lot of times where we're traveling where we will see a wake of vultures and we know, okay, we need to go the opposite direction of wherever that wake is circling. Because, zombies basically are left alone by most things, but the vultures are not one of the things that leave them alone. And they don't even fight the vultures off, which is wild to me, but that's part of why the vultures attack them. It's food that isn't going to fight back that works in a pinch. I do think that vultures prefer other meat to zombie. I can't imagine zombie tastes terribly good, but I can't imagine a deer carcass tastes particularly good. I'm not a vulture, so I wouldn't know, but we definitely help out the vulture population here by putting a lot of the zombies that we rip out in one spot. And, we have a pretty decent sized vulture colony. Um, there's also a fairly large antenna nearby where they roost. So we work in concert with the vultures quite well, and it works really, really well for us. There are quite a few people at the station who have said, when their time comes, that they would very much like to be food for the vultures, which surprised me. I thought I was the lone weirdo who wanted to do that, but no, the vultures have been so helpful to us that doing something to help feed them has really become kind of a thing, at least at the station. Not every place has a large vulture population, but here we have both turkey vultures as well as black vultures, and they really are helping us clean up. They are definitely working overtime at their vulture job. That said, part of the reason almost any settlement you go to is going to have separate medical facilities and that facility will be completely separate and usually blocked off from the rest. Most of them have fencing around them that's a couple layers deep, if they can have 2 layers. Not everybody can build as much as we have built and as much as the plant has built. But those communities that do have the material and the manpower do put the sick, especially the very, very ill, in a separate and cordoned off area, because sometimes you don't catch the person in time, they turn, and you have to protect the rest of the settlement. Which is why one of the things that has become commonplace is if somebody is on their deathbed, uh, we let them say what time they want to go, and then we make sure that they die in such a way they aren't going to turn into a zombie, because there are a lot of people who have a huge phobia about it, who do not wanna be a zombie. More than they fear death, they fear zombification, and I have to say I understand that pretty well, that fear is legitimate, and it's a pretty deep fear. So many of us have seen our friends and family members, or even just acquaintances, neighbors, turn into the undead, and it is horrifying. It's horrifying to watch the light go out of somebody's eyes to be replaced with this feral hunger. It's almost like the person leaves, but their body is puppeteered by something evil, something hungry. And, you know, most of us don't want that puppeteering. Most of us are not on board with that being the reality of how we pass. And so a lot of places have rules and protocols in place for the very ill, for the terminal, for the seriously critically wounded. And we're still doing everything in our power to keep people alive. Survive, survive, survive is not just my motto, but, is kind of anybody who is still alive's motto. Because all of us who have made it this far into the zombie apocalypse have proven not just a will to live, but a raw determination about it. So being zombified is not on our to-do list. So the protocols that we have in place are to keep the rest of the community safe, as well as provide a level of comfort and relief to the person injured. And there are a lot of injuries that, without modern medicine, we can't come back from. Appendicitis used to be something very, very easy to cure. And unless you're in a settlement with a surgeon and the capabilities of surgery, which, requires kind of a sterile environment, something as simple as appendicitis can remove somebody from the population. You know, the death rates have spiked not just because of zombie attack, but because of all of the other things that modern medicine used to take care of that we no longer know how to deal with, you know? And much like the military personnel and first responders, we lost the majority of those early on during the zombies. Um, a lot of surgeons, a lot of hospital personnel. You know, People die in hospitals. As much as hospitals try and keep people alive, it's not always possible. People die in hospitals. And, early on in the zombie apocalypse, people didn't automatically turn into zombies. But at a certain point, when that started happening, those who worked in hospitals or in various clinics or mobile units. There were a lot of mobile hospitals, for a while. They were they were caught completely unaware when death started turning the zombies, or the humans into zombies, because, that took 6 months to a year after the zombies showed up, after the fall of most of civilization. So, it was not something they were prepared for, and so a lot of talented and knowledgeable people were taken out. Prior to the zombie apocalypse, people used to joke, well, why are veterinarians so popular in the zombie apocalypse? Because there were a lot of stories where somebody who was a veterinarian became the community's doctor. And the answer for our reality, for our zombie apocalypse, is when animals die, they don't turn into zombies. When animals eat zombies, they don't turn into zombies. Zombification just affects humanity. Humanity alone is the one that is susceptible to this particular virus. And so the veterinarians managed to live, and they at least have a concept of how to perform surgery and how to do things along those lines. Most of them don't really want to deal with humans, though. There's a reason why they became veterinarians. They prefer dealing with animals, but we're in a situation where if you know how to perform surgery and somebody needs an appendectomy, it doesn't matter if you want to do it or not, you're doing it because no one is willing to let somebody else die at this point. None of us are. We don't want to see any more death. But one of the things that has become very important is recognizing when somebody does have a terminal illness, recognizing when somebody has a wound that is not recoverable. Because when that happens, we do our best to allow that person to choose the time and method of their demise. Um, you know, over at the plant, they have somebody who is very, very good at quickly and painlessly eliminating those who are terminal in such a way they do not become a zombie while also not feeling any pain. And that technique is being shared, much like Robert's Rules of Chaos is being shared. And so basically, as much as it hurts to let somebody go, as much as none of us want to admit defeat in the face of death, death is something we all walk hand in hand with these days. And it is important to recognize when death is imminent so we can let that person go, so that person can choose the time of their passing. Most of them get a last meal. Most of the people who are terminal who choose the time of their going get to say goodbye. They get to pass on their belongings. They get to tell us how they want their remains taken care of. There are a lot of people opting for cremation or, like we've been doing, sky burial over being buried in the ground. But we have had quite a few people who want to be buried where we grow our crops, or at least adjacent to that. Um, I don't think human bodies necessarily do a whole lot to make the crops better, uh, especially since we do make sure to bury them at least 6 feet deep because there are a lot of animals where we are. And if you don't bury them a minimum of 6 feet, they'll dig them up, And for somebody who actually wants to be buried, it's pretty important that you do it right. Because if you don't do it right, they don't stay buried, and that's not good for anybody. The whole reason we have funeral rites and funeral processes is because the human body, once it is no longer alive and well, happens to carry quite a few diseases and, can cause and spread a lot more death. So that's why we have a certain section where we do sky burial, where we put bodies out for the vultures and, other carrion eaters. And when we do that, we are all kinds of masked up and, almost like we're dealing with a biohazard because we are dealing with a biohazard. So, I think Rule 4 really focuses a lot on how to let somebody pass. But the other thing that it focuses on that we'll talk about, next week is taking care of your defenses. I am really tired today. And part of the reason I'm tired is we were up most of last night because our perimeter was just swarmed with zombies. And a certain point, when the perimeter is swarmed, you have to spend a lot of time piking zombies. That's just what you're doing that night. And, we piked zombies until morning. And we were lucky in that it was a slow trickle and not an overwhelming horde. But our inner fences are high wood fences. Our outer fences are chain link. And the chain link fences, you can pike through pretty easily. And there is always at least 3 people that are on fence patrol. And as time has gone on, the station here has quite a few people who are immune to the Zephyr. And so we try to make sure that at least one of the people who is immune is with the 3 that are out, you know. And sometimes we have as much as, you know, a dozen people out, just depending on how busy the zombies have been and, you know, all of that. But there's always at least a couple of people in a group who are immune to the Zephyr. And, you know, if you find anybody who has that immunity, they are invaluable because while everybody else is frozen, they are protecting people, they are getting people inside, they are making sure that doors are locked, chains on gates are locked, and things like that. You know, the people who have the Zephyr immunity are always a boon to any society, any group, any community they're a part of, because while everybody else is frozen, they can make sure during that frozen time, those people aren't zombie food, you know, and not being food for zombies is pretty much our number one job these days. You know, there's a lot to surviving that we are all doing, but avoiding being eaten by zombies really is our number one goal. It really is what we're doing the most of. So yeah, that's pretty much a lot of how we deal with death and dying here at the station. And it's not a happy topic, you know, it's not something a lot of people are comfortable contemplating. But since the zombies have shown up, we all walk hand in hand with death every day because the zombies make sure of it. You know, if for no other reason than they are the dead and walking around and we have to see them. I don't think a day goes by without a zombie sighting. You know, even if it's far away, there's always a zombie somewhere around. And that kind of forces you to look at death and deal with it and come up with mechanisms for handling it. And so, you know, the station here has handled it in those ways. And every community seems to have their own different protocols for it. You know, there are some places that have built a community in a building or in settlements where they actually have an incinerator or a crematorium. And while a zombie is attracted by fire, they aren't necessarily attracted by smoke. You know, if you're cooking food, they'll come to the smell of food because they know that humans will eat that food. But if you are cremating the remains of someone and you are inside a structure where they can't see the fire, they don't come for that smoke. They don't want cooked human, you know, they want raw and alive human. So, those lucky settlements that do have an incinerator or crematorium that they can use, that's pretty much how they dispose of the bodies. Because there's quite a few people who would much rather be cremated than even have the possibility of their body being reanimated. So, and I am sorry for the dark topic today. Next week, we'll talk a little bit more about ripping zombies and, you know, methods for that and, you know, good practices. Because as we all know, if you rip too many zombies, the zombies start following you. Somehow they take it personally, which, good, they should. It is personal. But anyway, for those of you out there, just remember, survive, survive, survive. We are rebuilding, we are making a new society, and people will find you. You will find the right community for you. It is okay to leave a community that does not fit well and find a different community that does fit. Many of the people we have here at the station have tried on a few different communities for size, and we've had people who have left the station because this wasn't the right fit. but most of the communities, at least in Illinois and in Missouri, we have a network of different places you can go. So if one community isn't the right fit, another one will be. Don't get discouraged if you don't find the right fit on your first try. I will be talking to all of you next week, and until then, survive, survive, survive. Robert's Rules of Chaos, rule number 4, everybody rests in peace. Every human life is sacred, every human life is an ally, and every human deserves to find peace at the end of their life's journey. No matter what you think of a person when they were alive, once they are dead, they should receive the same respect you would want for yourself when your time comes. If somebody is dying and there is no chance to save them, or simply upon sober and urgent request, each human is entitled to have their life ended in a way which prevents them from turning. The loss of an ally is only made worse by the simultaneous creation of a new soldier in the enemy army.